There is a silence that is not absence, it is a cry. It appears when the noise of the world falls silent and the soul remains restless. You can be surrounded by people and still feel an emptiness that insists on speaking. And in the midst of this silence, a question arises that echoes in the heart. Does God really speak to me? This question stems not from weakness, but from a desire to listen. Because whoever asks a question is already, without realizing it, opening themselves up to an answer. Perhaps you look around and see other people speaking with such certainty about, God told me this, or God showed me that. And you stand there, wondering why it seems so silent to you. Are you not spiritual enough? Is there some kind of blockage between you and heaven? The truth is, millions of people around the world carry this same restlessness. They pray, they seek, they hope, but they feel as if they are talking to themselves. And here's something that might shock you. God has never stopped speaking. The problem isn't his voice, it's our ability to hear. We live in a world that's too noisy, too fast-paced, too overthinking. Our minds are so full of notifications, worries and plans that there's no room left for the divine whisper. Because God, you see, rarely shouts. He doesn't compete with the noise of your life. He waits for the moment when you finally fall silent. But how do you know when God is speaking to you? How do you distinguish his voice from your own inner voice, from your fears, from your desires? This is the question that will guide us throughout this journey. And I'll tell you something, the answer is more accessible than you imagine. You don't need to be a pastor, a missionary, or have decades of faith. You need something much simpler and much more profound. Are you ready to discover that maybe God is already speaking and you haven't realized it yet? This battle between faith and reason is nothing new. People of faith have always faced this dilemma. Is it God or is it my mind? And you know what's even scarier? Even those with a solid spiritual journey have stopped and wondered if that thought, that feeling, that direction was really from God. You are not alone in this struggle. And no, this doesn't mean your faith is weak. It means you are human. The truth is that our hearts deceive. Jeremiah 17:9 says that the heart is deceitful above all things. So how can we trust what we feel? How can we know if it's God or my mind trying to justify what I already desire? This is the doubt that paralyzes many people. Because if I'm not sure it's God speaking, how can I take a step of faith? How can I make decisions that could change my entire life? Let me tell you about someone who faced this same doubt, and in a very dramatic way. His name was Gideon. God had called Gideon to deliver Israel from the Midianites, but Gideon couldn't believe it was really God speaking to him. So he asked for signs, not one but several. He put wool on the ground and asked God to wet only the wool and leave the ground dry. God did. The next day Gideon reversed the request, wet ground, dry wool, and God in his infinite patience did it again. Do you know what this teaches us? That God is not irritated by our sincere doubts. He does not abandon those who are genuinely trying to discern his voice. Gideon was not being rebellious, he was being careful. And there is a huge difference between doubting out of rebellion and doubting out of a desire for certainty. God honors sincere seeking. He answers those who truly want to hear. And when Gideon was finally certain it was God, he led 300 men against an army of thousands and won. So when that doubt creeps in, when you ask yourself, is it God or my mind? Remember, even giants of faith went through this. The point is not to never doubt. The point is to seek spiritual discernment with an open heart, because God doesn't speak to confuse, he speaks to guide. And when you learn to recognize the characteristics of his voice, everything begins to make sense. But ultimately, does God still speak today in the same way he spoke in biblical times? Some people believe that God only spoke in biblical times, that after the Bible was written, he kind of turned off the microphone, as if heaven had closed the doors of communication and now we only have the scriptures to read and reread. But that makes no sense at all when you know the God of the Bible. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Remember, why would he speak to Abraham, to Moses, to the apostles, and remains silent with you. The truth is that God communicates today in vivid and personal ways. He continues to be a father who cares about the details of your life. That decision you need to make about work, he cares. That relationship that's keeping you up at night, he cares. The anxiety that tightens your chest in the middle of the night, he cares. And because he cares, he speaks. Perhaps not with an audible voice from the clouds, but in ways that, when you learn to recognize them, are just as clear. God is speaking to you right now, at this very moment. It might be through an inexplicable peace that fills your heart when you think in a specific direction. It might be through a verse that leaps off the page and seems to have been written just for you today. It might be through a door that opens when all others close, or even through that piece of advice someone gave you without knowing you were struggling with that very thing. The problem is that we expect something extraordinary. We want Moses' burning bush, Jonah's whale, Paul's vision on the road to Damascus. But we forget that even in the Bible, most of the time, God spoke subtly. He spoke to Elijah not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a still, small voice. And that's how he continues to speak today, in a way that demands your attention. So yes, God still speaks. He never stopped. The question isn't, does God speak today? But rather, am I listening? Because he may be whispering in the middle of your busy day, waiting for you to pause, breathe, and finally realize he is here. He always has been. What if I told you that sometimes silence is the loudest way for God to speak? We're afraid of silence. So afraid that we fill every empty second with music, podcasts, conversation, television, anything. Because in silence, we come face to face with what's really happening inside us, and that's scary. But here's the secret that many people take years to discover. God speaks in silence. Not despite the silence, no silence. When Elijah fled from Jezebel, exhausted and afraid, God did not appear in the strong wind that shattered the mountains. He was not in the earthquake. He was not in the fire. He was in a still, small voice, or as some translations say, in a whispering silence. Think about that. God chose to speak precisely when everything was quiet, because it is in silence that our soul finally manages to hear what he has been saying for so long. Have you ever stopped everything, even for just 5 minutes, and simply stayed still? No cell phone, no music, no distractions. It's uncomfortable at first. Your thoughts start screaming. Your worries surface. But if you resist the temptation to run away, something incredible happens. You begin to develop spiritual sensitivity. You begin to realize that God was there all along, waiting for you to slow down enough to notice. By the way, since we're in this more relaxed moment, let me make a quick invitation. If this content is touching your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps more people find this message. And who knows, God might be using this video to speak to someone you know. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. Coming back. Silence is not absence. It is concentrated presence. It is where God meets you without masks, without haste, without noise. It is where he can mold, heal, redirect. When you learn to be silent, not only outwardly but inwardly as well, something changes. You begin to hear God not only when he speaks loudly, but when he whispers. And believe me, he whispers much more than he shouts. But how do you know that what you heard is truly the voice of God and not just your own thoughts? Here's something that will completely change how you discern God's voice. His voice brings alignment, not confusion, not chaos, inner alignment. Even when God confronts you, even when he corrects you, there's a peace that comes with it, a clarity that says, this is true and I need to hear it. But the voice of anxiety, fear, and insecurity, that generates turbulence. It leaves you agitated, desperate, without a foundation. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 14:33 that God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. So if that thought is disturbing you too much, If it's generating panic or pushing you towards impulsive decisions, it's probably not from God. Because His voice, even when it's harsh, is accompanied by a sense of direction. You may not like what you heard, but deep down He knows that's true. Think of it this way. When God speaks, it's as if everything inside you is reorganized. Your values fall back into place. Your priorities become clear. What seemed gigantic suddenly becomes small, and what you were ignoring suddenly gains the importance it deserves. It's as if a light turns on, and you finally see the path that was hidden in the darkness. And there's more. God's voice will never push you to do something contrary to what He has already revealed in the Bible. If you feel that God is guiding you towards a lie, towards betraying someone, towards abandoning responsibilities that He Himself ordained, it's not God. It may be your desires, it may be temptation, but it's not Him. Because God does not contradict His own word. He doesn't change the rules of the game mid-game. When you learn to identify these characteristics, peace, alignment, consistency with the Bible, loving correction, you begin to recognize God's voice as you recognize the voice of someone you love. You don't need to see to know, you just know. And speaking of the Word, did you know that the Bible is one of the most direct ways God speaks to you today? Some people think the Bible is just an old book, beautiful stories, moral lessons, that sort of thing. But those who truly delve into the Scriptures discover something supernatural. God speaks through the Bible in such a vivid way that it feels like the verse was written for you, today, right now. Have you ever had that experience? Of opening the Bible and a verse jumping off the page as if it had your name written on it? Hebrews 4:12 says that the Word of God is living and active, sharper than any double-edged sword. Living, not past, not dead, not outdated, living. This means that the same God who inspired those texts thousands of years ago can use those words to speak directly to your situation today. He takes a verse you've read 1,000 times, and suddenly, on a specific day, it has a completely new meaning. I've seen people open the Bible in despair, not knowing what to do, and stumble upon the exact psalm they needed to read. I've seen people struggling with fear and come across Isaiah 41:10, "Fear not, for I am with you." Coincidence? No. These are spiritual signs from God, showing that He is attentive, that He knows what you're going through, and that He has a specific word for this moment. But here's the catch. For God to speak through the Bible, you need open the Bible. It seems obvious, but so many people are waiting to hear from God while the Bible gathers dust on the shelf. God isn't going to compete with your Netflix, your social media, or your busy schedule. He expects you to set aside some time, open His Word, and say, "Speak, Lord, for I am listening." And when you do this regularly, something incredible happens. You begin to recognize the pattern, the style, the heart of God. You begin to understand how He thinks, how He acts, what He values. And this prepares you to recognize His voice in prayer as well. Because prayer isn't just you talking, it's where God answers. The prayer most people say is a monologue. We talk, ask, complain, vent. And when we finish talking, we get up and leave. And then we wait for God to answer in some magical way later on. But what if I told you that God wants to answer during prayer? What prayer should be? A dialogue, not a monologue. When you learn to listen to God in prayer, everything changes. You're no longer just throwing requests to heaven. You're having a real conversation with the Creator of the universe. Sometimes the answer comes as a clear thought that arises out of nowhere. Sometimes it's a peace that fills your chest and you simply know that everything is all right. Other times it's a gentle correction, a redirection, an idea you would never have had on your own. The secret is to pause. Talk to God, yes, but then wait. Be quiet, give Him space to speak, and know He probably won't speak with an audible voice, but He will impress your heart. He will bring a verse to mind. He will give you an insight that solves that problem that seemed impossible. He will show you an angle you hadn't considered. God answers prayers, sometimes with a yes, sometimes with a no, sometimes with a wait, but he always answers those who truly want to hear. The problem is that we want the answer in our time, in our way, and when it doesn't come as we expected, we think he didn't answer. But sometimes God's answer is precisely the prolonged silence that forces us to trust more. And you know what else? When you develop that intimacy in prayer, when you begin to truly listen, you realize that God answers through things you haven't even asked for. He anticipates your needs. He opens doors before you even know you need them, because he knows you better than you know yourself. And these answers, they come accompanied by signs that confirm the path. God doesn't play guessing games with you. When he speaks, when he directs, he confirms. And these confirmations come in ways that only those who are attentive can perceive. It can be through circumstances that align perfectly. It can be through people who, without knowing your struggle, say exactly what you needed to hear. It can be through that inner peace that doesn't make sense, but that you feel so strongly that you can't ignore it. Think of Abraham. God told him to leave his land and go to a place he would show him. Abraham obeyed, and as he went, God confirmed the direction. Not all at once, step by step. That's how God works most of the time. He doesn't give you the complete map of the journey. He gives you enough light for the next step. And when you take that step in faith, he confirms that you're on the right path. Have you ever prayed for something and suddenly 3 different people brought up the same subject without planning it? Or needed an answer and opened the Bible to the very verse that talks about it? Or had a door open right after another one closed, and you realized that the closed one was for protection? These are not coincidences. They are confirmations from God, showing that he is guiding every detail. But caution is needed. Not every sign is from God. The enemy also gives signs. The difference? God's signs bring peace, alignment with the word, and direct you toward purposes that glorify him, not just you. Deceptive signs, on the other hand, generate confusion, rashness, and generally appeal to your ego, your pride, your carnal desires. The confirmation of God in life is marked by spiritual coherence. When it's him, the pieces fall into place. Not perfectly the way you imagined, but in a way that deep down makes sense. And you have that feeling of, this is it. Not because it's easy, but because it is right. And when it is right, God leaves no room for confusion. He directs with clarity. One of the things that most marks the voice of God is the clarity of direction. When he speaks, even if the path is difficult, he knows what you need to do. You may be afraid, you may have doubts about how it will work out, but you have no doubt about what the next step is. It's as if an internal compass aligns itself and points in a specific direction. God is not a God of confusion. So if you are completely lost, not knowing what to do, perhaps you haven't yet heard God clearly. And that's okay. It doesn't mean God is absent. It means that perhaps you need to seek him more intensely, be more silent, wait more. Because when direction comes from him, it may be challenging, but it is never confusing. Think of Noah. God commanded him to build an ark in a region where it had never rained. To human eyes, it made no sense at all. But the direction was clear. Build the ark with these measurements in this way. Noah didn't know exactly but I knew what to do it. And that's what saved him and his family. God's direction for your life may not make sense right now. It may seem crazy to others, but if it's him speaking, you'll have unwavering conviction in your heart. You may not have all the answers, but you'll have peace with the decision. You'll have the courage to take the step even when everything around you says, don't do that. And you know what's beautiful? That as you obey God's direction, even without understanding everything, he will reveal more. He will show you why. He will confirm that you made the right choice, because the signs that God is speaking to you don't just appear at the beginning. They continue to appear along the way, reminding you that he is with you. But for that direction to become increasingly clear, you need one thing: intimacy. You recognize the voice of someone you love. You don't need to see them. You don't need to ask, "Who is it?" You simply know. It's automatic. And do you know why? Because of the time you spend together, because of the intimacy. It's the same with God. The more time you spend with Him, the easier it becomes to recognize when He's speaking. Intimacy with God isn't built overnight. It's not that quick prayer before bed or that thank you for the food before lunch. It's in the moments where you truly open up, where you worship, where you cry, where you confess, where you simply stay there in His presence without asking for anything, just enjoying being with Him. John 10:27 says, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." They hear, present tense. It's a skill that develops. The sheep recognize the shepherd's voice because they live with Him. They spend time with Him. When a stranger calls, they don't go because they know it's not His voice. Now think, how much time do you really spend with God? Not talking about it, on He. Not only asking for things, but conversing, listening, reading His word, worshiping. If that's not enough, it's no wonder it's difficult to hear His voice. But when you start investing time, when you make God's presence a priority, something changes. The voice that once seemed distant becomes clear, unmistakable. And the most incredible thing, in private, God reveals things He doesn't reveal to everyone. Secrets of His heart, specific plans for you, purposes that go beyond what you dreamed. Because God doesn't hide things. Of you, He hides things for you. For those who draw near, for those who seek, for those who truly want to know Him. And when that happens, when you finally develop that intimacy, you realize something that changes everything. There's a moment in the spiritual journey where everything falls into place, where you look back and understand that door that closed and destroyed you back then, it was protection. That no that hurt so much, it was redirection. That waiting that made you doubt everything, it was preparation. And you realize with tears in your eyes, God was always speaking. You just didn't know how to listen yet. He was there when you thought you were alone. He was whispering when you thought it was all in your head. He was guiding you when you thought you were lost. The problem was never God being silent. It was you being so noisy inside that you couldn't perceive it. And you know what's most impressive? When you finally understand this, when you look at your story with spiritual eyes, you see the hand of God in it, all in that piece of advice you received unintentionally, in that book that fell into your hands at the right moment, in that verse you read by chance that changed your perspective, in that inexplicable peace that held you up when everything was falling apart. It was God. It has always been Him. God is speaking to you right now, perhaps through these words, perhaps through that restlessness you feel in your chest, perhaps through that insight that just dawned on you. When God speaks to the heart, He doesn't need to shout. He simply touches, and you feels, you know. The big question is no longer, does God speak to me? The question now is, what am I going to do with what He is saying? Because hearing is one thing, obeying is something completely different. And it is in obedience that the voice of God becomes ever clearer, ever more frequent, ever more intimate. Because ultimately, God doesn't just want to talk to you, He wants to walk with you. So here we are, at the end of this journey, but at the beginning of something much bigger. Because now you know, God speaks. He never stopped, and He wants to speak like you about your life, about your challenges, about your dreams. But for that to truly happen, you need to make a choice. The choice to be silent, to search, to be willing to listen, even when the answer isn't what you want to hear. God doesn't force His voice into your life. He respects your free will. He waits for you to be still, open the Bible, kneel and say, "Speak, Lord, I'm really listening now." And when you do that, when you truly make yourself available, something supernatural happens. Heaven opens, the voice becomes clear, the path is illuminated. And look, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Listening to God requires discipline, patience, and a surrendered heart. But I guarantee one thing, it's worth every second. Because when you learn to listen to God, when you recognize His spiritual signs in your life, you never feel alone again. You never walk in the dark again. You never make important decisions without His guidance. So here's my invitation. Start today. Not tomorrow, not next Monday, not when things calm down. Today, pick up your Bible, find a quiet place, and simply be. Talk to God, but then listen. Don't rush. Don't fill the silence with empty words. Just be present and trust that He will reveal Himself. If this video touched your heart, if you realize that God is speaking to you through this message, share it, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, because this message needs to reach other people who are also searching. And who knows, you might be the instrument God will use for that. I'll leave you with Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Acknowledge His voice, trust in His guidance, and see how He transforms your story. God is speaking. The question is, are you listening?